So let's bring James in first. Kick back, Tanner. I can't wait to chat with you. But James, obviously, number one, he has to say happy to Miss Val. Also, if you have time, James, tell folks what Miss Val means to you. Seriously, it's her birthday. This is what the show's all about. And secondly, and this is an order. This is an order, sir. You got to tell a story about your father. So back to you. Actually, you can. Oh, there he is. God, we'll let anybody onto this radio show.
Dogs. Yeah, dogs like me. So let me just say this. Yeah, happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Val. Happy birthday to you. We love you. We love you. We love you. That's what you mean to me.
Thank you. Thank you. That made my day. Thank you.
That was great. Did you do any of that singing while on your 2 tours over at War or anything? You had that like memorized. Good job, Val.
Well, actually, I did. I used to sing "God Bless America" every time I would fire the 50 caliber machine gun. I'd get scared. It helped me from peeing my pants.
One of these days, when we're on a shall I say, a more quiet, maybe private program, I'll have you chat some 50 cal stories. Okay.
Yeah.
Story about your daddy. Let's launch it. You talk to us. You know what's going on in this show. And number one was Miss Val, and number two is just what your daddy meant to you in a quick story. There you go, James.
Yeah. So now see, my old man, he was tough, man. He was tougher than woodpecker lips, man. That guy, he was. When you're younger, you don't really appreciate your father because your father is the one that is disciplining you when you're doing wrong. Your father's the one that's trying to teach you to do right. But there are certain things I remember most about my dad. And my dad would say to me when he started teaching me how to hunt, I was an excited kid, man. I had ADHD before it was even known to be ADHD, okay? So I was always bouncing around, talking and stuff. And then he'd tell me when we get out in the woods, he'd tap me on the back. He said, "Steady, son, steady." And and there was a comfort that would come over me, especially whenever I got ready to, you know, shoot your first deer or you're tracking game or bear. We hunted bear, we hunted deer, coyotes. We used to shoot a bunch of those, and these can be very dangerous animals, kind of like um, not different than some of the stuff that y'all hunt up in the far north. But I would get nervous, and I can remember my dad, he'd tell, you get shaky, first time you're trying to aim this great big rifle. And I hunted with an 8 millimeter Mauser that one of my uncles brought back from World War II. It was a German Mauser. The damn thing was so heavy it was hard to hold up. 8 millimeter round to just kick you like a mule. So I'm bracing for that kick from that rifle. And on top of, trying to stay on target, you didn't have a scope. You used iron sights. And you usually were shooting somewhere between 75 and 100 meters out. And, in West Virginia, that's a long shot, because everything's wooded. But I can remember, and I could, my dad saying that, "Steady, son, steady." And he'd whisper it in my ear, and I could hear it in my ear. And when my dad died in 2000, I was um, young. I was 32. And then, but I used to think about that when he would tell me that, as a kid. And when I was over in Iraq, I, was put a post about my dad. And I'd lay awake at night and I'd look up at those stars and I'd always imagine, my dad's probably looking down on me right now. So I gotta do this. And when I would get in some of the most hellish times of my life, I could hear my dad's voice saying, "Steady, son, steady." And it is to this day at 57, it still is something that I hear my dad say, whispering in my ear. When I start to get upset or you start to, take things too serious. So, while my dad is not here physically with me, he definitely is here spiritually with me. And for those of you that are lucky enough to have your dad still, if you haven't called your dad to tell him that you love him, or you think that you had some kind of an argument that means nothing. Maybe you haven't talked to your dad. You haven't talked to your sons or your daughters. I would highly suggest that you do that before you're talking at a funeral about what you wish you would have done or what you wish you would have said. Um, I took my dad for granted on a lot of things, and and thought he was just a crazy old man, trying to, you know, uh, stop my vibe. You know what I mean? He was, but he was always giving me his best advice. And the best advice I got from him was to be steady, steady, son, which means take it easy and focus on what you're doing and don't get excited. So that's what I will say about my dad. He was
James, when you were over fighting wars,
Mhm.
Was there a moment or a time where your dad just really made a difference, whether it is hanging in there or maybe a message or whatever while you were at war?
Yeah, when I got shot in the chest, yeah, it was a pretty troublesome time. I took a direct shot to my ballistic vest in a ceramic plate, and violently, I think that's what the historian said, violently thrown to the floor. I guess that's a good term, violently. But I had also been shot in the hand, and 2 weeks before that, I was shot in the leg. So, and I was, I don't know if you've ever been shot or hit real hard with something, in your calf area, but you get a Charlie horse about every couple of hours until that thing heals up. You wake up with those Charlie horses at night. You wake up with that Charlie horse at night, and just imagine that pain not going away for a very, very, very long time. These were things that were constantly there. But when I got shot and I fell down into the bottom of the Humvee, I could hear my dad's voice. Literally, um, I had resigned to my fate, and I remember saying, "If this is what dying's like, I'm okay with it. I'm really okay with it." And then, I could hear the old man saying, "Get up, get up," and I would start to stagger and pulled myself up, but I could feel his presence. I could hear that whisper, "Steady, son, steady." And it allowed me to focus on what I was doing. I mean, and as I came up, there were two guys that was trying to throw hand grenades into the vehicle. And they threw one that went over the vehicle, and I dropped my rifle in the bottom and I couldn't grab it. So I grabbed the first thing I could, which was a Red Star Cluster pop flare, which hell, I even forgot what that was until I saw it. Somebody had wrote about it. And I grabbed it and I took that flare and you hit it. And I shot it at these guys, but it went into a methodical movement. But yeah, the old man was always and has always and remains with me to this day. And now I've got many more. I've got friends, that were killed and died since. And it's like, you know, I, I met this woman one time years after the war, not too long ago. And she's one of these, spiritual ladies. And when she seen me, she was like, she held her hands up. She said, "You have a lot of spirits that are around you." I mean, I don't know if you believe in that or not, and that's fine if you do or you don't. But I have gotten out of some pretty bad situations that I probably should have never got out of. But more importantly, I've been able to remain steady and calm and not go to jail, because really, honestly, there have been things that have been done since I've been back. If we would have been living in the Wild West days, we'd have just gunned you down, like Jesse James or something. um, but it's allowed me to not only maintain a level of steadiness, but to also have a level of empathy for even the people that hate you. So I think that goes into that whole term of steady, son, steady, and that's the best advice. And my kids hear that from me as well. Um, and I tell them that story. That's what your grandpa used to tell me: steady, son, steady.
Mm.
And and hopefully one day they'll tell the story about how I did that. I don't know. I try to communicate with them every day. We send text messages. Technology's allowed a lot of things, but they're all busy with life. So sometimes I wish that I could talk to my kids more, and I do try, and my grandkids especially. I got 12, almost 12 grandkids now. That's a lot of grandkids, man.
Almost everybody I hear that's my age, 60s and stuff, they're real big issues. Their kids now are, spread out across the country. As close as we get with social media, the further away we get. I want to ask you one question though, Captain. By the way, how's your schedule here? Are you working part-time today, or you show up to work today, or what are you doing?
Oh man, let me tell you something. There is no part-time work for the good captain here on Capitol Hill, because we're trying to get some things done. I mean, and it's like, the righteousness of our work is, it's pretty clear. I don't just engage on things that are just nonsensical. And then you've got to deal with all of the radical, bongos BS stuff you see up here.
I want to, before I forget, before my pre-dementia forgets here, though, you were talking earlier about your dad and wartime and stuff, and it is moving stuff here. I had a quick question, and unfortunately, we won't have a whole bunch of time because in the past, this is worth a 20-minute, 30-minute segment, but you had told me, and I remember this forever. Oh, there you go. Oh, look at that. The shameless plug. That's the only one. That's the only copy of that book that's left. There's none out there. Oh, look at you. I'll have to pay you a few bucks over for that little plug there, Captain. But you said something to me.
Yeah.
During literally, it's been hundreds of hours we've chatted a lot about war.
Yeah.
And you told me that after that huge experience that you had over there, and I won't get into it, but it's where Iraqi soldiers surrendered to a UFO. Okay.
Damn right.
Okay.
They did, yeah.
But you said, again, if you haven't heard that story, there's at least 2 different clips on YouTube with it. Iraqi surrender to you. Anyhow. So, but you said something to me. What happened to you after that? Because you watched jihadists just surrender, right? But what happened to you is you felt, and again, tell it in your own words, you felt almost like the armor of God around you and your platoon after that. Tell us a little bit about that, and how long was that, a period of time from then to when the war ended?
So for me, that happened, right during that April uprising time period. And, a lot of people don't know this, but I think I've told you this. I've had bullets pass through the crease of my pants. I had a bullet come through the shirt here once. I had a bullet ricochet off my helmet. This is all after this is happening. People say, come on, man. Yeah, okay. Well, I don't care if you believe me or not. Our vehicle was shot 23 times, and bullets crisscrossed on the inside of that vehicle at various times. And literally, I have a guy that was holding his rifle, and a bullet went through the shoulder strap, on his rifle. Never touched him. So what I felt is I felt a protective presence. I felt a calm that I had not felt before. Now, it doesn't mean that you weren't scared. Anybody says they weren't scared is a liar or they're crazy. And I think that I was a little bit of crazy. Okay. There's no doubt. You can see that picture that's up there. That was taken probably 2 weeks after I came home. Definitely the 1,000-yard stairs there. I look at it and I realize that, I was in a bad spot. And but I was handsome though. I mean, you got to admit that's a handsome picture right there. I'm a handsome dude, but
I'm kind of getting almost man crush going here, James. Let's get that photo off the screen.
Yeah. Well, and and obviously, that has changed some, but the eyes are a window to the soul, and I think that whole experience with that, I can't explain it, but the soldiers that were with me, and especially those that went through the whole incident over the Easter uprising weekend, that was a spiritual event for us, to be ambushed on the 7th of April, going in to be, wounded, shot in the chest, shot in the hand, all these things. To have everybody on your crew get wounded, everybody. One guy didn't get the Purple Heart because he got a cut, but it was a significant cut that went. So everybody had been bled there for something. And then he grabbed the barrel of a rifle and it burned his hand because it was red hot. And I think that that experience was something that has helped me throughout life. So if you can go through that, you can go through anything. But let's just not apply this just to warfare. Let's apply this to life in general. So there were a lot of things that occurred with me before that time. I can tell you this, that up to that point, I was, you know, um, I would just as soon just kill you as to look at you. Okay. And I hate to even say that. And that's not a bravado thing. That's just the real, it was business. And that's all. And I used to see it as that. Now I don't see it as just business anymore. I've learned to love my enemies. I've learned to pray for my enemies. I've learned to forgive my enemies. And I've learned to pray for their families. You know what I mean? Because there's a lot of them that that are gold star families in their own way, and we made them that way. So there's nothing good about that. War is the ultimate offense to humanity, and for those of us that participate in it, we have a responsibility to tell people the truth, not just tell war stories, but to tell the truth. And the truth of the matter was, it was a hell of an experience. Um, but God's almighty hand, brought us through that hell. And if you can't see that, um, then I don't know how else to explain it. But I do give credit, to faith. It's just like the thing with the UFO, thing. A lot of people say, well, little green men, all this other stuff.
Hello, hello.
Okay, we are still live. I think we just lost James for a
Yep.
minute.
Sure.
So
Keep
I will
keep him there. I'm sure he'll just pop back up. Could you
Yeah.
bring Tanner in?
Yes, I can.
'Cause
I think
no
James
ma-
is just getting a phone call. That's kind of what happens when his phone rings.
Yep.
Good morning, Tanner. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much. Good morning, and very, very happy birthday to you, Val. You're what? I think 30.
Oh, you're too kind. 44.
Yeah.
Yep. 44.
Tanner, no, what I'm so thrilled to have you on. We might be putting you back in the studio, depending on James here.
Well, how dare you?
How
dare you?
But
Nerve.
because if James is back on the screen, I wanted to introduce you to, because you've kind of been ships passing in the night. Go ahead.
I mean, how freaking inspiring is that guy? Oh my goodness. Yeah, I mean, first time seeing Captain James. He actually, I don't know if he can hear me at all. I know, like Val said, he may be on a phone call, but he actually called and wished me a happy birthday on my birthday, as did you, Val. Thank you very much. A month ago, and just what a wonderful individual. Wow, powerful stuff there. I mean, you guys all know how important faith is to me, and to hear it from that perspective is it's humbling.
It really is, and the hundreds of hours I've chatted with them, and how much there's just so many stories, and I just tell them, Tanner, I ain't shit compared to you guys. You guys that went over there. I think he spent like 18 months in the hospital when he came back. I said, we're nothing compared to you guys. Nothing. All those guys. So that said, again, you two have been kind of ships passing in the night. I really, if he's up here,
There
I
he
just
is.
want to. Are you president and accounted for? Ooh, hey James.
I hope you guys can see me. I mean, it's like I'm getting all of this. Can you see me full, or is it like half a screen?
No,
Well,
you
No, I can
are
see you.
on. Perfect.
You're
Okay,
on.
good. Goodness gracious. I mean, I could hear you all, but I couldn't say anything.
Oh, thank God. Thank
Yeah,
God.
thank
Wouldn't that
God
be
for
a
that.
change? That's like a mute button. Because before, we never know what your schedule is, James. You're in DC. You're in the bowels of DC.
Yeah.
But I wanted to get Tanner in here because you two have been kind
Tanner, how's it going, buddy?
of.
Captain McCormick, I'm blessed. How are you, my friend?
Good. Hey, God bless you, man. I mean, I see you're doing righteous things. See, you're following your faith. That's what you're doing.
Absolutely.
That's what I'm saying.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's the
And
most important thing we can do, right?
that is the only thing you can do.
Yeah.
You do that, and then I'm telling you, and it's not easy, Tanner. I know it's not easy. We could all go someplace else and make a lot of money, can't we?
Yeah. I walked away from a lot of money to follow my faith,
Yeah, there you go.
to follow what I'm doing. So yeah. It's not easy, but it is the most fulfilling work that you could possibly do.
So, Tanner, what did Jesus say? Pick up your cross and follow me, right?
That's right. That's right. It's funny that you say that. The prayer that I've been praying a lot lately is, Lord, lead me through the narrow path.
Yeah.
Because it's the narrow gate. It's the follower that came to Jesus and said, I follow all the commandments. I do everything that I'm supposed to. What else do I need to do? And Jesus said, you know what, go back and sell all of your possessions. You pick up your cross and follow me. And the parable that he was saying there is, the road to hell is wide and easy and it's enticing and it's inviting and but the narrow path and the narrow gate is that's the true journey.
Yeah. You'll
And
run
it's
into all of these distractions along your way, as I'm sure you've already seen some of them. There will be people that you always thought was a friend, maybe, and they'll come out against you, and all of these things will happen.
Yep.
But to be, as we know, to be wounded in the faith is a great honor, and accept
Yeah.
it and move forward. I mean, it's all you can do. God bless you for doing this mission. This is a mission.
Well, and you spoke about it just a little bit ago. The most important thing, and I tell my kids all the time that forgiveness is a superpower, right? There's a lot of people that rail against the church because they were hurt in church. Well, it wasn't God that hurt you. It was people that hurt you, and people are fallible. I'm fallible. I'm as it says in the Bible in the book of Timothy, I'm the worst sinner I know. Nobody knows my sins more intimately than me. So if I have to atone for who I am at the deepest part of my sin, then how can I not forgive those that are seemingly against me or want to speak out or are struggling with their own things? We're all struggling, and the more that we dig in, the more we find our authenticity. And that's my main passion. I believe that authenticity is built through mind, body, and spirit. And the foundational piece of that is your spirit.
Mm-hmm. What's been your largest challenge since you've taken up your cross and got on the path? What's been your biggest challenge? And look, I hate to say this because then, the devil looks at it as a way, I mean, so don't share all the intimate details, but what has been the one challenge that has been really hard for you? And then I'll tell you what my challenge has been, but I'd like to hear what that challenge has been for you.
So I'll tell you the most challenging piece. as I've been building this business in authenticity coaching and faith-based authenticity coaching, the hardest part is it's a saturated market, right? The coaching market is a saturated market. So the biggest challenge is obviously finding clients.
Mm-hmm.
How do I find people that want to work with me? But the real challenge behind that is, how do I not retreat? How do I not go back to the life that I had before? I spent 3 decades in the culinary industry, specifically in culinary leadership. I could go back and get a culinary position tomorrow, but that's not where my calling is anymore. And I just recently watched a movie that was it was recommended by my pastor at church, and it's by the family that have the Christian music band for King and Country.
Okay.
And yeah, and kind of the story. I'll give a quick synopsis of the story. The family is a Christian producing family, producing Christian shows in Australia. Australia goes through a massive recession, and the family loses everything, and so they move to Nashville with the promise to work with a Christian artist. Well, when they get to Nashville, that deal falls through. And so the father is, distraught, the whole family is working together to do whatever they can. And of course, God is faithful and always provides. So he provides a house for him. He provides a car for him. He provides, families that injected him. And there's one scene where the dad is just, he's so depressed. He can't get out of bed. He hasn't got out of bed for days. And the mom takes the kids out, and she takes them to this playground, and they pretend that they're pirates on the playground.
Yeah.
And there's this pivotal scene where she says, okay, now we need to grab our torches and we got to burn the boats so that no one can get away, essentially. And she says to the kids, we got to burn our boat also, because if we want to make it, we can't go back. We have to move forward here where we're at. And ever since seeing that scene, it's just resonated with me. And then of all things, God speaks to us in the greatest ways, right? So I wrestle with this, retreat struggle every single day, Captain McCormick. Every day I wrestle with it. And this morning I was taking my son to the gym. We go to the gym every morning and work out.
All right.
And, yeah, authenticity, mind, body, and spirit, right? You got to take care of all three.
Right. Yeah.
So we're listening to this song on the radio that I'd never heard. And so I pull up my Siri. I said, Siri, what song is this? And I'm listening to the Christian radio station. It's a song called Joy by For King and Country. And the album that it's on is called Burn the Ships. And it was just one of those, God reminding you, Tanner, if you're going to do what I called you to do, you have to have faith that if I brought you to it, I'm going to see you through it.
Amen.
So,
yeah.
But that's the biggest struggle is retreat.
Well, my biggest struggle was my temper. I had a very violent temper, and it's like asking God for patience. So I asked God to help me with my temper, and you know how He did that? He sent me every foul-mouthed person that there was on the planet, it seemed like, to try to challenge you, to goad you into a fight. And it was very difficult. You know what I mean? But the more that I ignored, the more that I would not give them the oxygen so the fire could continue burning. And that's a good term is, how do you stop a fire? You remove its oxygen so it cannot continue to burn. And oxygen is when we give room for malice and hatred in our own heart. And you don't even have to say anything, but I've had people, but I will tell you this, that everyone that He sent to me that I did not respond to. And I had some of them that did some ugly things, and not physically. It was always, they would always go to that point because there was, in these prayers, God would tell me they can't touch you. You know what I mean? You have a prayer. Now they're not allowed to touch you. They're not allowed to violently attack you. Then you can defend yourself. You can defend yourself. And so that was always there. So that was always a good feeling. You always knew that, but they would always, and this was what was crazy about this, Tanner, is that they would be, I mean, cuss. I had one of them show up with a rifle one time, at an event with him and his wife, and they were just cussing and going crazy. But they never got within arm's reach of me. Never did they get within arm's reach of me. Never did they touch me, any of my items, anything, nothing. But they just said, it was all said. And of course, you're getting angry and, you're really trying. I'm like, and I would just smile and wouldn't say anything. And then it's like, man, you're a coward. You're a coward. You're not even going to say anything. No, I said nothing to say. Just keep on going. I hope you feel better. And, but then you look around the room and everybody around the room are like, who are these idiots?
Yeah.
When they came in, some of them were their friends and they lost friends. And in the end, there was another one that came to our church and cursed and just carried on something awful. And he was just arrested for child pornography.
Oh, wow.
And he
Well,
was
that guy could be buried underneath the prison as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. And, and it is, but when he was caught on video, trying to meet a 16-year-old boy, he obviously, it was all of this. And he saw me probably 3 days after that. He says, well, go ahead, make fun of me. I'm like, I'm not going to make fun of you. I said, I'm praying for you.
Yep.
And he started to cry and he walked away, but he was crying, and it was like, so everything that you said, the retreat, because you could go back to that lifestyle. You could go back to being a chef and make a lot of money,
Mm-hmm.
But I think that there's something that you can even do with those skills in the capacity that you're in now. I believe that you could feed a lot of people, Tanner, and do the things, utilize the gifts that God is giving. I'm trying to figure out what my gifts are sometimes. To being able to shoot a 50 caliber machine gun and all this other stuff is great in warfare, but what is the true gift? Can you fix cars? Can you encourage people to not give up? Can you cook for them and serve them? Will you wash the feet of the disciples?
Yeah.
And that's ultimately what I have learned is a level of humbleness and humility. And I think that it's a great thing. There's no question that we could go and do whatever we wanted to do, Tanner. But really, what we're doing is we're trying to lead people to Christ, and that's the most important thing we could do or could ever do. There's nothing that I have ever did in the past that will be any more important than being the example for people so that they will want to pick up their cross and follow Christ as well.
That's it. That's the Great Commission, right? That is the calling. We weren't called to be served. We were called to be servants. And God gave us each individual unique talents, right? I know that I'm a strong leader. I was able to lead in very tense and difficult situations, nothing compared to the situations that you led in. But, there's a lot of similarities between the culinary industry and the military. I mean, we even call our teams brigades, and we structure them in similar states like that. We go into, we refer to it as going into battle every night, and you have to trust the people that you're beside. And what I've learned about myself in that is that I want to help others grow. I want to help others find their faith, find their purpose, find their value, because, I spent a lifetime with a misdirected identity, very similar to what you're talking about, shooting a 50 caliber gun. For the longest time, I was Tanner the chef. I wasn't Tanner the man of God. I wasn't Tanner identifying with who God made me to be. I was identifying by what I did, or, I struggled with alcohol for years. I identified myself in an addiction rather than an overcomer, so
That's correct.
it's so powerful to be able to look somebody in the eyes. It's very similar to you did, and say, you know what? We all fall short of the glory of God. I don't have to judge you. My number one guiding principle in my life is that I can't control the first thought that comes into my head, but I can control the second.
That's a true statement. Yeah.
And many times I don't control it in the second, right? Because I'm hardwired to judge just like everybody else, but if I'm intentional about it, then I will get to that point, maybe it's the third thought, maybe it's the 10th thought, where I go, this isn't aligned with who I am. This isn't who Tanner is authentically. How can I judge anyone knowing who I am, and what God saved me from, and continues to. I mean, it's like you said about, praying for patience. I mean, what does God do when you pray for patience, right? He gives you opportunities to be patient, and those opportunities are challenging. Recently, so for many years, I prayed, God, refine me like precious metal in the fire, clean out the dross, but God, put me on the potter's wheel and mold me like clay. Right.
Yeah.
But all of those things require difficulty, right? It's not easy to be thrown into a fire and have all of your impurities, pushed out. It's not easy to be molded like clay, and then get put into a kiln to harden. I mean, all of those things are difficult. And there was a point maybe a month ago where I said, okay, God, you know what? I don't need to be refined anymore at this moment in my life. I'm okay being, 18 karat gold instead of, 24 karat, or however that measures out. Like I could take a break from the molding piece right now, but the importance is recognizing that, every day I want to be better than I was yesterday, and not better for me, better in who Christ expects me to be, and how that presents to the world and the people around me. Val, I can't hear you.
How about now?
Sorry, that was just me. I was saying, I love what you guys are saying. That's so good. It just tugs at my heartstrings, but I love the part where you said, if he brings you to it, he will bring you through it. And so often it's like, wow, there's heavy stuff going on, but it's amazing. I'm going to bring Greg back in here too.
I have two questions. I have a question for Captain McCormick. I have a question for Tanner. This is off the wall a little bit. By the way, I listened to both of you guys for an hour. This is big, big, big time. A question, and then honestly, I'd just like to hear you guys still converse. Tanner's got a lot to say here, Captain. I'm going to hang you in as long as you can. This is a real cool meeting. I have a quick question. It's a little bit off the wall, but you guys talked a little bit about pedophilia earlier. The elephant in the room in our society. Okay, fine. I'm a true crime buff, which people don't know. I mean, the Bonnie and Clyde era and Silence of the Lambs, profiling, all that stuff. And I follow a guy real closely named John Douglas. John Douglas was one of the first, at least, recognized criminal profilers. He was the main character in Silence of the Lambs. Anyhow, read him, and what's interesting about Douglas, although he was in law enforcement, he was 2 decades ahead of his time. He was in law enforcement, but he was, I think, a Democrat anti-death penalty guy. It was kind of different. I don't know party wise, but definitely an anti-death penalty guy, with one exception. And he published this in the book Mindhunter. He said, "Sorry, everyone, I've been around law enforcement for a while, and the guys that are tweaked with this little problemo, okay, of liking children," he said, "Sorry, if there's a true, and I mean a DNA conviction, not a he said she said, if there's a true convicted pedophile and sexual assault weirdo guys, he says the only option is a swift death penalty. It is the only way that you will ever stop these guys from committing this, because it's hardwired in these guys. It would be like asking a heterosexual guy to convert to something else. You just can't do it. My question to Cap McCormick and to Tanner: do you agree with that, and or other positions on death penalty? There you go.
You can you want to go for that first, Tanner? I mean, I can. I can give my my thoughts on that, but ultimately, I will say this: that as Christ hung on the cross, he begged God to forgive those that put him up there. You know what I mean? So I do believe that there is a level of compassion, and there is a level for forgiveness, even for killing our Savior, Jesus Christ, because that was demonstrated in that, through his death, burial, and resurrection, we can all be saved from whatever sins that we've committed. Now, as far as killing these people, um, the old James McCormick would say, yeah, I'll beat you to death with a shovel and then use it to bury you with. You know what I mean? And that was a side of me that I think it still comes down every now and then, but it's not there like it used to be. So, do I think that there's a need for the death penalty? Absolutely. I think biblically there is a justification for it, in following the laws of the land, and praying for those in authority. All these people that are rising up against the president now and all that stuff, they're wrong in a lot of things that they are rising up against him for. So I think that there's a level of wickedness in this land that has allowed that and called that behavior normal. As a matter of fact, there's organizations, or at least one organization, that encourages this kind of behavior. And I don't want to even say that organization's name to give them any oxygen. But I will say that if you have developed an organization that promotes, sexual actions between children and adults, and you're part of that or support that in any way, shape, or form, doesn't matter what I do to you. It's going to be the second death that's going to be much worse than the first. So that's why I told the gentleman that I'm praying for you, because I don't want to see anybody go to hell. But ultimately, they will make that decision to go there. God does not send us to hell. We choose to go because of our actions and not following his will and not accepting the salvation that has been given to us through the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. So I think with that being said, I would be more worried about the second death than the first death. So there's punishment to be paid for that, whatever that punishment is, delve it out. But I think we should work on their souls regardless to help them not go to hell. That's my feelings.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that was incredibly well said. It's I don't think it's as black and white as do they deserve to die or not. When you mentioned the pedophile earlier, I said I think that people like that should be buried underneath the prison. And really what I mean by that is to what Greg said earlier. When somebody is attracted to minors, when they're attracted to children, you can't change that in them. What we're attracted to, we're attracted to. If you're heterosexual, you're attracted to the opposite sex. If you're homosexual, you're attracted to the same sex. If you're, it's the psychology behind it is very complex. It's very, very complex. I think that anyone who willfully hurts another person is all you can do is pray for them and hope that there's some sort of rehabilitation to the standards of how do you get them to not reoffend. You know, there's been enough case studies that have proven that castration doesn't work on child predators. They actually end up hurting children more because they can't do what their sexual inclination is. Really, all I can say is I can go from my point of view. I mentioned earlier that you know, the very first guiding principle that I ever had in my life was forgiveness is a superpower, and I truly believe that. And where that came from was at the age of 12 years old, I was molested by a priest, and we at the school that we were at, he molested multiple boys, and you know, the boys brought it up to the leaders, and they ended up removing him from the school, and they sent him to a school for girls because this guy liked little boys. And, you know, the Catholic Church, their idea was if we move him to a school for girls, he won't reoffend. I struggled with it for years. When I finally ended up suing the Catholic Church over it, you know, my one stipulation was that I'm not looking for monetary compensation. I'm not looking for money. The only thing that I ask is that this guy is never allowed to be around children ever again in his life.
Yeah.
Ever. That's, you know, I don't want him dead. I don't want him hurt. I don't want him. He's obviously hurting enough if he's, you know, broken like that, especially being somebody that purports to be a man of faith, you know. Sure. So the only thing that I could reconcile with myself is that I've forgiven him in my heart. You know, again, we're all broken, we all fall short of the glory of God. My request is that he's not around children. And by that time he had passed away. So I don't know, you know, what that is, but that would be my thing is, and you know, and there's even more difficulty with it now than with the technological age, the way it is. You know, back then we didn't have the internet. You couldn't just hop online and, you know, go onto the dark web and find all of these terrible things, you know, but, you know, I it's why I like the work that people like A21 does, or the Tim Tebow Foundation, where they're really trying to fight against human trafficking. One of the craziest statistics that I've heard in the past couple of years is there are more people in slavery right now today than at any other time in the history of humanity.
That's true statement.
And it's a wild thing to think about, you know, and I get that, you know, there's billions more people now than there was, you know, in history, but to think that there's people that are being trafficked, you know, for all different reasons, and specifically, you know, for the sexual exploitation of minors, those are the people that we should be going after. You know, the ones that are feeding the pedophiles, the ones that are feeding the nefarious dark, you know, the dark triad, as Jordan Peterson would talk about, you know, the dark hearts of man.
Sure.
But you know, I believe that there is cause for the death penalty, but I don't believe that it is always as black and white as we like to look at it as. You know, I mean, I know that if somebody hurt my son,
yeah,
I would be hard pressed not to kill him. You know, and that's a fatherly, paternal instinct of, you know, I want to protect my children. Mm-hmm. You know, if somebody hurt my daughters, you know, I would do whatever I could to make sure that they could never hurt somebody again.
Sure.
But it's so much more nuanced than, you know, do we just kill them?
Yeah. I mean, and that's a, you know, that's a great concept as well. You know, what you're saying is you know, there's room in our hearts for forgiveness. But it's a little bit harder to get there when you do certain things. Yeah. You know what I mean? And it is, you know, for me, you know, and I'm sure for all of you, you know, when people come out and they hurt your profession or hurt your ability to, you know, to support your family, it's you're mainly angry because they've hurt your kids, your family in the process. And And so when you think about that, you know, I don't know how many times that I've killed people in my heart, you know, because you've wished them dead or whatever, but a lot. Okay. Too much.
Yeah.
Too much.
Yeah.
And not being able, you know, and not acting on that, I think is, you know, has been key. So just because you don't act on it, you know, remember that, you know, when you even look at someone with that thought, that you've already committed an act of murder. So, you know, I
Yep.
mean, in God's eyes, I've committed murder thousands of times, you know what I mean, over the, you know, the periods of your life. But you know, there's a level of forgiveness and you haven't acted upon that. But when you talk about, you know, the pedophilia thing and some of the things, the bizarre things we saw over the last few years is just in this country is extremely bizarre. And I'm not trying to, but yeah, I guess you can call it a political statement. But the political statement here is that um, you can't call yourself a Christian and support unchristian things.
Right.
Now, you can't call yourself a Christian and hate people. You know what I mean? Even your enemies, because Christ called on us to love thine enemies and pray for him that does wicked against you or does evil things against you. You know, how many times do I forgive someone, my neighbor who offends me? 7 times or 7 times, you know, infinity is essentially what Christ was saying is that, you know, there is no limit because if you put a limit on your heart, then would you want God to put a limit on his heart and his level of
Right.
forgiveness for us?
That's right.
So, you know, and that's really hard to do. It's it's incredibly hard to do. But we also can't just say, and this is a tool used by the devil, okay? Well, Jesus would forgive me and say, just turn a blind eye. No, Jesus never said turn a blind eye. He still went in and he turned over the tables in the temple and whipped people out of there with a knotted rope, not once, but twice. And I think that there are times when we have to follow God's command. You know, he sent his armies to destroy legions and said,
Hmm.
leave nothing alive, bring nothing back, no sin from into the camp, bring nothing back, leave nothing breathing. And so, you know, that sounds crazy to some people, but he knew how deep the sin was to where it was like, don't even let the chickens live. You know, I mean,
Yep.
and that's fact. So when everybody now is talking about the Israelis waging war, understand that the Israelis have historically known how to wage war in a way that would just absolutely blow your mind in today's age. So what they're doing in Gaza and all of these things, it's really not bad if you're not picking up a rifle shooting at them. You know, there is some
Yeah.
collateral damage. There are people that are being injured and killed in some cases. But this goes into everything else. At what point do you say enough is enough? You've got to stop this craziness and insanity. The pedophilia, maybe a death sentence would be a great preventative tool. Castration, as you said, doesn't work. You still have the ability to use that mind because you can't act on it anymore, as you said. Now I'm going to do something else. They get their thrills out of human suffering,
Hmm.
power over something. They are the ones that would kick a dog in the face that's on a chain. I don't think you can fix people like that either. I
Yep.
honestly don't. I think that they fall in the same lines as pedophiles and everything else. They're violent natured people but more importantly, they would never come up and do that to you or me, Tanner, or anybody else that could defend themselves. They're
Right.
looking for somebody that's defenseless, which makes them a coward on top of being a wicked worm. And I can't find any value in that kind of an individual to be allowed to roam free throughout the streets of America.
Do
So there
you
you go.
think there's the ability for rehabilitation for somebody like that?
I think that the only thing that could save them is for them to come to Christ and to accept forgiveness and to truly mend their ways. You know, we can look at Saul of Tarsus, who became Paul. You
Yeah.
know, he hunted down Christians and killed them and everything else. You know, he was there and held the coats when they stoned,
Stephen,
Stephen.
yeah.
You know, he was there when that happened. And so I do think, and thankfully, there is forgiveness because we can be forgiven. And there is also discussion about what makes your sin either any worse, what makes your sin worse than my own. So I have sins that I deal with every day, thoughts.
Yep.
You know, I talked about killing people in your mind. You know, drive down the streets of Washington D.C. a couple of times. You know, or New York City or Chicago, all these places. But there is a difference. There is a difference between someone that's cruel and sadistic, but there is no difference when it comes to answering for your sins. We're all going to answer for them. So
Yeah.
it's like, is your time in hell going to be worse than this person's time in hell? Because ultimately, what gets you to hell is being a Christ rejecter. You reject Christ. That's your problem. That's what sends you to hell. And when you truly accept Christ, then you know what? You lose the desire to do the evil and the wicked things. The devil's still going to poke at you because he knows you're in the flesh, as long
Constantly.
as we're in the flesh.
Yeah, constantly.
But you won't act upon it if you truly follow Christ. So that's why it's like the gentleman, the priest that you talked about. And that's a very troubling thing that you went through. It makes it to where it's hard for you to trust people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
When a person in that position does something like that. I'm sorry you went through that. And that is definitely not someone that represented the body of Christ. Um, but I bet you've thought about it and you said, you know, I pray that he found salvation before he died. How many times have you said that or thought that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, I believe redemption is the path to rehabilitation, right? And it goes back to what we've been talking about. You know, I know what a terrible, miserable person I was for a lot of my life. For internal circumstances, external circumstances, me trying to appease the world, you know, me trying to be of the world. And I know that redemption led me to the rehabilitation that I needed to actually look at myself and say, this is not who I am. This is not who I want to be. This is not who I want to present to others as. This is not the energy that I want to bring into every situation and room that I'm in. I wouldn't have had that without redemption. I wouldn't have made those steps. And maybe I would have made those steps, but those steps wouldn't have stuck without redemption. You know, and the thing that you know really transformed me with the part with the priest is, you know, years later, even after I'd forgiven him and prayed for him multiple times, I went through a process called theophostic prayer. And it's where somebody who's trained in it, they guide you through a prayer with Jesus, where they bring Jesus into the meditative process. And you start at your earliest memories, and you start with the hurts that happened as early as you can remember. And most of my hurts were easy to kind of just work through, but there was one that I specifically got to where at 12 years old, when that happened to me, I remember I could see it so visually that Jesus, there was this brick wall, and Jesus broke through that brick wall, and there was 12-year-old me. And I got to embrace 12-year-old me. I got to like apologize to 12-year-old me, because that piece of me I bricked up and walled away. And I didn't let experience all of the great things that had happened in my life since then. And it was one of the most transformative processes that I've had, you know, and it led me down a deeper understanding of self and a deeper understanding of the love of God, and how much he wants to just truly heal the deepest parts of us, you know, because humanity is fallen. The world is fallen. and we have to live in it, and in it we can find incredible light, but we have to embrace that light and want it to radiate in us and through us and around us.
Yeah, and I think, it takes incredible strength and incredible faith in order for us to be able to find the ability to do exactly what you're talking about. And it's very difficult. We're distracted. I've been distracted at least 15 times in this conversation that I've had with you, with calls, texts, you know what I mean? And obviously, I hate to say it, but I am going to have to get off here because I have another meeting I have to go to. But Tanner, this kind of conversation is exactly the kind of conversation that people need to hear, because they have to start really seriously thinking about the fact that you will not live forever on this physical earth. And there is an accounting for everything that you've done. My grandmother used to tell me this, and it scared me. And I'm glad she told me this, because when I was young, we didn't have cell phones and all that other stuff. I mean, thank goodness, you know what I mean? Because there was a lot of things, and my sons told me this one time. They said, when you was a kid growing up, Dad, you didn't have, somebody, sticking a camera in your face. Any dumb thing you did not become a matter of record for eternity. I think that in many cases, technology is great, but in some cases it's terrible. I think that social media sites that keep anything that's defamatory or nasty. I had a friend, her 13-year-old boy hung himself because of somebody put a stupid video up about him on social media, and he died. Um, you struggle with that because you just want to just go slap the faces of the parents who didn't step in. And more importantly, the social media company owners, the multi-millionaires and billionaires that allowed that to be on their platform, and countless requests to take it down that could have saved that boy's life. Are they responsible for his death? I think so. And I think there will be, I think that there will be an accounting for that, for even those that think, well, I really didn't do anything.
Right.
But he's one of thousands of children that have done the same thing because of that. Yeah. So my grandmother would tell me when I was a kid, she said, when you die and you go to heaven, we're all going to be there. And all this stuff do you think that you got away with behind our backs, it's going to play like a big movie theater. Okay. So all this stuff, and me at the time, I'm thinking about a lot of things, you know what I mean, that I thought I was doing right. Behind closed doors and in the darkness that you didn't think nobody's seeing and hearing about. And at that point in time, it was like that aha moment. But we have become a society to even that doesn't scare people, because and it's like, it's not about being scared. It's about a reverent fear of God. And where is that now? It doesn't exist in some people because they think God doesn't exist. They think that it is. And the most dangerous thing that we could have ever got to in society is when we took God out of everything that we do. And I think there is a movement now to put him back in the center focus. Think what you want to think about Trump or anybody else, but I honestly believe that at least there is the effort being made to say what's right, what's wrong, but ultimately, what would Jesus do? What would God do in this case? And we need to start thinking that way again. I mean, whatever happened to WWJD? It's like, it's going to offend somebody,
Yeah, Jesus was villainized for so long in the mainstream that people were scared to say that they were Christians. I mean, I remember when Chris Pratt went on, I don't remember whether it was the Oscars, the MTV Movie Award, it might have been the MTV Teen Choice Award, something like that. And he got up there and he spoke for about 5 minutes about how everything that he had was because of God.
Yeah.
and his faith in God. And, you know, they tried to villainize him for it. And it was really one of the first moments where it really turned the tide, where, you know, the public said, hey, we really like this guy, you know, and what he's saying, maybe there's some validity to it. You know, there's that line from the movie The Usual Suspects, that's the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world that he didn't exist.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, and it's true. It's true. If you think that the evil isn't out there, you're not paying attention. You know, and evil, you know, one of the things that has just been paramount in my life over the past couple of years is the devil isn't this like this entity out there trying to hurt you, right? My uncle Jim and I talk about this all the time, you know, especially when we talk about addiction and alcohol. And it's the devil's always at the door, right? And the devil is not just like trying to beat down your door, you know, coming to take over your house. The devil's knocking at the door saying, hey, you know what? It's not so bad out here. Hey, I don't even want you to open the door. Just look through the keyhole. Just look through the keyhole, and we'll see it's not so bad. We're not doing anything wrong out here. We're just having fun, you know? And so you peek through the keyhole and you go, oh no, maybe that's not for me. And the devil keeps knocking and says, you saw it wasn't so bad. Just crack the door a little bit. I don't even want you to come outside. I just want you to crack the door. Just peek your head out. See what's going on out here. It's not so bad. The devil is the king of distraction. He's the king of deception.
Yes.
You know, that's where he gets you. He starts to convince you little by little that these things aren't wrong, you know, or that they're not so bad.
Yeah.
You know, and so you start walking down that path. And you know, with that analogy of the devil's always at the door, every time I open that door, I end up so far on the other side of that door that all of a sudden I turn around and I go, how did I get here again?
Yeah.
You know, and it's because of those little distractions. It's those little deceptions. It's you know, the devil isn't trying to destroy your family by coming in and you know, raining hellfire and brimstone on you and destroying everything around you immediately. He wants to take it piece by piece by piece by piece. And the goal isn't to ultimately hurt you, it's to separate you from God. That's the devil's goal.
That's a true statement. And I think that that's a wonderful thing. And I'll tell you, I would love to sit on here with you, but obviously I've got the distractions from all the devils around here now.
Yeah,
There's a lot of them here, man.
I tell you what, my friend, it is so good to finally get to spend some time with you. I really, really appreciate this conversation.
What a blessing. What a blessing.
Dude,
what a blessing.
Captain and
man, I love you, brother. I love what you're doing. Love you, brother. I do. You're my brother, man.
I love you too. God bless you. And man, what
hold up, hold the train, hold the bus here, boys.
Yeah, you act like it's your show. You act like this is your show. I'm pretty sure Captain Mccormick and I just took it over.
Yeah.
No, this was incredible. No, this was incredible. But to know before adieu, whatever they say, I want to give Val. Okay, I'd like to give her an opportunity just to summarize and or ask each of you before you leave. I was going to say, Captain, before you pop smoke, but you beat me to it, and be able to ask Captain McCormick before he leaves, and Tanner will hang around. Okay, let's keep Tanner around for a little bit. So go ahead, Val, and take 2-3 minutes here.
Okay, thank you. Let's let Captain James go if he's on a schedule, and he and I can have a chat another time on that. If he has to run, he's got to go.
Well, I want to say happy birthday again, lovely lady.
Thank you.
You know, and listen, I'm going to tell you all something. If no one's told you they loved you today, I love you. And not only do I love you guys, but let me tell you, God loved you so much that he gave his only begotten son, Jesus Christ, and whosoever believeth in him shall have everlasting life. And you know what? We'll all be in heaven together, whether we spend any time on this earth physically together. We will definitely, that's the message that I want to deliver to America right now. Put away your bayonets and your hand grenades for each other, man. Figure out something else to do. Go play baseball, you know, or hockey. with Greg
Well, there
Meekin.
you go. Would you? I don't. Would you have been out of? Would you have been out of place in those crazy ass campuses in the '60s and the hate Ashbury people? Would you have been a fish out of water?
Who,
Yeah,
me?
yeah.
Yeah.
That was
Yeah.
before you were born. That was before you were born.
60. Yeah, I was born in 68. So yeah, man. Yeah, man, I would have been out of place. I mean, I felt out of place whenever I was a little kid going to grade school and, St. Albans, West Virginia, and all the craziness was going on there in the early 1970s. Um, it was a tough time. I mean, I can remember being terrified as a kid because, it was high school and grade school. So if you're in kindergarten, trust me, or first grade, you saw all the high school kids and they were all huge. I mean, they were just big kids and they were always arguing, fighting, cussing, quarreling about something. We had the big race riots and stuff. You had all that stuff going on, racial, you had the busing and all of that thing, uh, you know, forced integration, you know, you know, it was a tough time, and I never did understand it, but um, it was a scary time for sure. And of course, Vietnam was winding down. My dad was coming back from his second tour in Vietnam, so it was yeah, yeah, man, yeah. I would have been a fish out of water.
Where can people find your work and follow you guys, James? You're unbelievable. Go ahead.
Well, right now, what I would like to do is put a pitch out for the Vietnam Veterans of America at www.vva.org. And the great things that this generation is continuing to do for their fellow veterans and Americans. We're having great conversations with everybody in this current administration, the Secretary of Veterans Affairs, the President of the United States. We've met with them all, and you know, say what you will about everything that's going on. And I know some people don't like to hear this, but they're doing a good job. They really are. And all of this fear mongering that's going on in the media. Remember, these are the same people that told you that it's okay to hate people, it's okay to burn down cities, and all these other things that went on and continue to go on. And we just can't be part of any of that. You know what I mean? We have to be part of something righteous. We got a couple pieces of legislation out there. We'd really like to get congressmen to sign on to a congressional gold medal that's honoring the donut dollies. And the donut dollies were volunteers during, they've been around for a long time, but in particular during the Vietnam War, there were over 600 of them served and 3 of them were killed in combat. Now, they were volunteers for the Red Cross who, um, they don't get any benefits, and several of them have died of cancer related to Agent Orange, and they were not taken care of. You know what I mean? So I think that there is a need to recognize the valuable contributions that they made, in the whole mission to take care of service members serving in combat. And then the other one is the teams legislation. It's the toxic exposure environmental mitigation study. It's a study that's going to be looking at all of the toxic exposure. You hear about Agent Orange, you hear about burn pits, you hear about Persian Gulf War syndrome, you hear about poison water at Camp Lejeune and everywhere else and all these things. Well, it's time for us to look at not just what these issues are, but also look at the 30 stateside sites that have problems right now. 30 bases across America have issues with contamination. But more importantly, how is this affecting our biological descendants? And on top of that, we really need to take a study and a look, and we've added a closer look at vaccines. You know, when I went into the Army, they shot me in both arms with vaccines. I have no idea what I got, but I know I got several shots all in one day. I had people that literally got sick. I had a guy that passed out in line in front of me after he got his shot, must have had an allergic reaction. I seen all of these things occur. The fact that, the wake up call was during the COVID vaccine, but how has that affected our biological descendants? And nobody is doing a study. So Senator Kennedy needs to make this a priority. Teams needs to be looked at. So when you look at toxic exposure, toxic exposure, environmental mitigation study, mitigation is the key word. We're trying to mitigate future issues so that every time we go to war or every time that somebody serves in the military, maybe it would be good to have a generation that didn't have the fallout that follows you for life. It killed my dad. It killed my uncle, cancer. Very young men when they died. So, and what was their crime for that? Their crime was serving their country in war. That is not a crime. That is an honorable thing to do. And I think that if you're really going to say, I'm going to take care of veterans, you got to take care of the veterans. But more importantly, how is this affecting their kids and their grandkids? Maybe we have the answer for why we have higher rates of autism and all these other things that are going on. My grandson's autistic, folks, and it's like, what happened? What caused that? And you're never going to find out unless you do the studies. So we're asking, that's the call I'm getting ready to get on here in like 10 minutes. So please
God love you. Thank you, Captain.
support
And
us.
when's the last time you chatted with the president?
I chat with his staff about once a week.
Okay, cool.
Yeah,
Next show, maybe
I have
tell
a personal cell phone number with a person that can talk directly to the president. Not everybody has that opportunity.
next show. Please tell Tanner about the ties, the Trump ties, the 6 of them next time.
Yeah, I will, man. Yeah.
Cool. God love you.
Hey, God love you too. And if you guys need anything, let us know. There's a great place for you to go on and sign up for updates at vva.org. And then you can send me emails at jmccormick@vva.org. God bless you. And thank you for having me on the show.
Awesome. God bless you. God bless you, Captain McCormick. Thank you so much.
Peace out, folks.
Wow, that was great. I love our updates from Captain James.